Little quick blurb. Virginia Hands and Voices is a nonprofit, parent-driven organization dedicated to supporting deaf and hard of hearing children and the families and professionals who support them. Hands and Voices is unbiased about communication choices and believe that the choice that a family makes is the right choice. A couple thank yous before I get started. First of all, Renee from Civic Access, who's our interpreter. I believe that I heard that Monica was our captioner's name from Hamilton Relay. We definitely appreciate their services, make this available to everybody. And then I would also like to thank Terry Urban, who's the chair of Virginia Hands and Voices. She's kind of running all things Zoom behind the scenes tonight, making sure the right people are spotlighted, letting people in, that kind of thing. So thanks to her for being here and really for kind of coming up with this idea and setting all this up. Finally, before we get started, I want to introduce the panelists, and they're going to say more about themselves. So I'll just be real quick about everybody. Eric Rodriguez and Robin Ramirez are both dads of deaf or hard of hearing kids. Colin Wells is a dad. His kids are hearing, but Colin himself is deaf, and he's also a teacher of the deaf. So that was something we really wanted to do when we were kind of talking about who the panelists would be to offer that perspective. So thanks to Colin for being here. And then again, I'm Jacob Thornton. I'm going to facilitate, and I'm probably going to be a sometimes panelist. I'm going to kind of try to keep us on track in terms of time. And if there are things that I think I have to offer that the other guys have said, I will jump in, and I may skip some questions. We'll kind of see how it goes. So with all that, let's go ahead and get started. Because Eric and Robin are fathers of deaf and hard of hearing kids, I'm going to let those guys go first with the questions. Being that Colin's perspective is a little bit different, I'm going to let Colin go third because sometimes we're changing the question up a little bit for him. And then I'll jump in at the end if I'm going to, or we'll go to the next question. So with that, again, thanks for being here, and we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with Eric, but Robin, this question's for you as well. Please tell us about yourself, where you live, the age of your child or children, how old they were when you received the diagnosis of hearing loss, and what amplification, if any, do they use? What communication methods do you use?
Sure. So, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Eric Rodriguez. I live with my wife, and I have 4 kids. We live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. My youngest son, Theo, who's 3 years old now, was diagnosed with bilateral hearing loss in both ears. He currently uses hearing aids on both ears as well. And something pertinent for this discussion later is when we were getting him fitted for hearing aids at 3 months, we had some genetic testing done, and it came back that he has a rare syndrome called Pendred syndrome, which ultimately leads to progressive hearing loss. So at some point in his life, he will lose all of his hearing. So that's it for me.
Hi, everyone. Robin Ramirez. I'm a college soccer coach here in Roanoke, Virginia. I live with my wife and our daughter Isabella. She's almost 6, and then our son Leo is 2. Leo was diagnosed with being profoundly deaf on both sides. He received the diagnosis at less than 2 months after he failed his newborn screener, and he is implanted with bilateral cochlear implants. He was implanted at 8.5 months and activated at 9.5 months. We use total communication. So we're in the process of learning sign language. Our family is, and then teaching Leo sign language along with him learning to process sound.
Great. And then Colin kind of follows along the same thread. Please tell us about yourself and at what age your parent, if you know this, at what age your parents received your diagnosis or identification, and tell us if you've ever used amplification before.
Hello, everyone. I'm deaf myself. I am the only deaf person within my family. My whole family is hearing. I became deaf around 18 months of age. I was deafened from bacterial meningitis. So after that, I became fully deaf. But luckily, my parents acted upon that right away. So they explored various options. Understand at that time, this was in 1981. There was not a lot of options available at that time like there is now. At that time, you had oral communication available, cued speech, or sign language. Those were the three options available. Of course, my parents were encouraged to do oral communication only, but my parents did more research and found that that wasn't the only option that they could pick. They had several different options or methods to choose from. So basically that became a total communication approach. I did wear hearing aids, but back in elementary school where you had the large device, it was like a box that had wires hooked to it that would hook to the hearing aid. So it was a very old school hearing aid setup. But I couldn't hear anything, but I was required to wear the device. This was from kindergarten through 5th grade. However, I did get a cochlear implant at the age of 9. And this was in 1989, around that time. And if anyone wants to ask me more specifically about that, I'm willing to share my experience about my cochlear implant. Right now, I do not use it. And that's pretty much a nutshell about myself.
Great, thanks. I'm going to answer this question just so everybody knows who everybody is. I'm Jacob. I live in Richmond, Virginia with my wife and 2 kids, Margot and Charlie. Margot is 4, she'll be 5 in August, and Charlie is turning 3 in a couple days. Both of them were born with profound bilateral hearing loss, identified I think Margot was identified within 2 weeks. And with Charlie, I think it was a little bit later, but we could tell, he didn't pass the newborn hearing screening. So just with our experience, we pretty much knew right away with him because we had also done genetic testing, and it was connexin 26, which is a genetic thing that, it may or may not pass deafness onto a child. But, when he didn't pass the hearing screening, we knew. Both of my kids have bilateral cochlear implants, and we are doing a bilingual bimodal approach where we do both spoken English and American Sign Language. But this changes from day to day, but ideally we're trying to keep the languages separate so we can focus on the grammar in both languages. So that's kind of our path as we stand right now. And I think it's going well, I'd like to think. So we're going to move into the next question. In the early days, we'll start with Eric again. In those early days, after learning about the diagnosis, please share with us how you were feeling and ways you coped with the news about your child.
Yeah, so just to also put some context, and I left this out. So I have 3 other children, all are hearing. Right now, they're 10, 8, and 5. Theo is 3. So when we got this news 3 years ago, I had a 7 and a 4, 5, and a 2-year-old, right? All were hearing. So originally, when we got the news from the audiologist, we also failed the hearing screening, but we had failed that on previous kids as well. So we were familiar with that. But when we went to the audiologist, and she let us know that he had significant loss in both ears. I think originally I was sad, but also a little bit overwhelmed because we had all these other children as well. And, I didn't know what that was like, and I really felt for him, personally. So that's kind of like a moment of sadness, not anger or anything like that, but just immediate sadness for him. But, I just couldn't relate, right? Like, what were we going to do? So since this was new for my wife and I, something I'll never forget, kind of really how we coped very early on was, I'm not a social media person. I don't have any social media. So my wife and I went home. She pulled up her social media, outlets, pretty much does what I think a lot of people do is, Google search everything you can, right? So we're Google searching Pendred syndrome and, infants with hard of hearing or deaf. And she found some really great posts with a bunch of very positive outcomes and outlooks, with some reassurance that things will be okay and you can do it, those kind of things. So I'll never forget that because we were just kind of in a state of, what are we going to do? So that really, really helped us in that moment. And it actually led us to also reach out to the community, which we didn't know. There's a very small community in Fredericksburg, but now we're realizing that it's much bigger than we thought because we just weren't, in that deaf community. And I was able to meet my first deaf adult. And when I heard his story and I told him mine, through an interpreter, he gave me a hug that I'll never forget. Like, just like, you're doing it, you got this, and just really helped with, spreading the love really on that. So it was a great moment I'll never forget.
I know for me, very similar to what Eric was saying there, those first early days after learning the diagnosis, it was tough, if I can be honest. And looking back, I blame just my own, ignorance, I guess, and lack of knowledge, never really knowing anyone, who was hard of hearing or deaf. But after a few days of that first initial feeling of, whether it's sadness or just not knowing what to do, I think, what really helped was starting to educate myself and our family, really reading up on, on famous people, on athletes, being a coach on athletes that are deaf or hard of hearing, and just thinking more not of what my child will not be able to do or experience, but changing the mindset of thinking, what are all the things that he is going to be able to do and that he can accomplish and that he can experience. So with that, it's kind of given us a positive outlook on, on what my child will be able to do, if he puts his mind to it.
Great. And then Colin, I think this will be a great, no pressure, but I feel like this is going to be a great, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. What advice can you offer fathers who receive the diagnosis that their child has hearing loss?
So of course, this can be very difficult for hearing parents to find out the news that their newborn has failed a newborn screening hearing test. They oftentimes don't know what to do. They're completely in the dark. They feel stuck. Luckily, I think now in this day and age, we have so many more resources, more organizations out there that are willing to help educate people. The resources are out there to help educate people about what to do with their children. My advice to fathers or to parents would be, do not dismiss them. Do not make them feel that they have to conform or fit into a hearing culture. Teach them that it's okay to be who they are. Acknowledge that they are different and there's nothing wrong with that. Do what works for that person. And remember that, not every method of communication works for every person. No two children are the same. And also it's important to instill them with confidence, encourage them that they can do anything that they want, that they set their mind to. It doesn't matter if they're deaf or hard of hearing. You still encourage them that they can do what they want. Aim for the sky. And of course, there will be many times where it can be quite heartbreaking that, they feel like they're different. They feel like they can't do things that other kids can do, but it is important that they know that you as the parents will always be there for them. And that's what my father did for me. And just to let you know some background about my father. He is a Vietnam veteran, blue collar, worked for the electric company. When he found out that I was deaf, he was in shock. What was he going to do? But he did not give up. He persevered. He kept learning. He even learned how to sign as well. He could communicate with me in sign language from 18 months all the way to now. And if he can do it, then any father can do that.
Yeah, amazing answers. It's great from everybody. Yeah, it's interesting. I think part of the thing about tonight for me is that there just seems to be not a great outlet for dads to kind of have these discussions. So I don't think I have much to add, but I will just add to what, especially Eric and Robin said, and really Colin said about his dad. When I first found out, I was devastated. I mean, quite honestly, I'm a musician. That's kind of what my life had been built around until that point. And I think in terms of coping with it, very similar to what Robin and Eric are doing and what Colin's dad did. For me, action, I need something to do to kind of help me process things. And just, like those guys said, going and meeting some deaf adults, because that's part of why I was devastated. Exactly, what Robin said. I just was ignorant. I didn't know any deaf people. So meeting some of those people. And then I also remember at the time, one of the first things I did was learn the alphabet in ASL. And I would run just to kind of get out some energy. And while I ran, I would finger spell. I would just kind of think of words and I would just spell the whole time. And it helped me practice that and just kind of feeling like I was making progress. Just kind of, I think, kept me pushing through it in those early days. I just, wanted to add on. I know there are some dads here with really young kids. So I think what everybody shared is great. So moving on to the next question, we get into making some of those decisions for your kids. As we know, there are many different options regarding what may work best for your child, whether it's amplification or different communication choices. How did you as a family come to make your own decisions for your child? And did you feel supported by family, friends, medical personnel, anybody else that's involved in your life or that you involved in your life at that point?
Yeah, so for our situation, this is something that was new territory for us, right? So, my youngest son, hearing loss, brand new scenario we were dealing with. So we kind of really just did our research, figured out what worked for us. We're a mostly hearing family, but I think instantly we started doing ASL. And that's, because we had done actually baby sign with all of our other boys, some of the simple stuff when they were younger, and it worked very well. So we continued with that, and now it's obviously grown. So we use a total communication as well, but it's kind of a mixture of verbal, sign language, gestures, lip reading. Theo, who's 3, we can tell, right? He predominantly lip reads when you're talking to him if his hearing aids are out. So we do it all. The nice part is some of our boys are really taking to it. Some of them aren't, but my oldest, actually, it's really great to see. He's all about signing and will sign to the baby all the time, which is great. That's just, it's helpful for him and for us, just to give Theo everything we can give him right now to get done what we need to get done, kind of thing. I will say the family has, for the most part, been very supportive. When we told them we were gonna, do verbal, ASL, all these things, and instantly some folks on both sides of the family were learning sign on their own. Jacob, just like what you said, the ABCs. I mean, if you can get the ABCs down, you can have a conversation essentially. So, there's still some family members who I think are in denial that our son can hear, and of course he can hear in a room where it's very quiet, right? But we're still chipping away at them. But I would say mostly everyone has been supportive. As far as medical professionals, I guess in my opinion, most of them have been kind of tight-lipped about it. They're not leaning one way or the other. They just kind of, they ask questions about what we're doing at home and how we're communicating. And just, we'll say, that's great. They haven't really given any, do this, do that kind of thing, which is nice as well. So we kind of just did our research, and this is what works for us at this point in time.
Yeah, for us with with all the different opinions regarding what works best, I think, what helped us was, my wife and I really decided that, we needed to get on the same page and just not really, listen to any of the outside opinions and make the decision, what works best for our child. She and I mean, we have our daughter who's hearing, and so what's going to be the best decision for Leo, the best decision for our child. So we went ahead and did our research, and those first few months just kind of all right, we're going to do what works best and not really listen to not even the medical professionals gave their opinions, and others from the outside gave some opinions, and it was just we're going to do what we believe it's best for Leo, and so that's what we went ahead and decided that he was going to get to be implanted, but also to learn. We were going to learn ASL, and we tried. We're still learning. We're by no means proficient, and I doubt. I'm hoping that one day we'll get there. But we're learning. We found signing time videos that we play. Our daughter picks up sign language so fast, and so that, I know that can be a little frustrating for myself. But yeah, we're working on that. In terms of medical professionals, personnel, after learning that we were planning on continuing sign after he was he was going to be implanted, we did get a little bit of pushback, and there are some audiologists that do push back a little bit on when they hear that that we are doing sign as well as speaking with him, but we just say okay, and then go ahead and keep doing our thing as a family, because we think he's doing well, doing both, and so we're we take into consideration what the medical professionals say, but I think you kind of have that gut feeling of what you're doing as a parent is right for your child, and I think that's what we have going on here.
Great. And then Colin is a teacher at the Deaf, working with school-age children. What is something parents can do at home to support their children in school? And what's the best way to make that home-school connection?
First, I want to share some information about myself. So I've been a teacher of the deaf or hard of hearing for about 12 years. The first 5 years, I worked in elementary school, and now this is my 7th year working in middle school. So over those 12 years, from what I've seen, of course, 90% of deaf and hard of hearing children are born into hearing families, and 90% of those hearing families don't know what to do initially. So I always provide them with resources, some ideas about what to do. And unfortunately, oftentimes I see sort of like not walking, talking the talk, but not walking the walk. It's easy to, it's important to be involved with your child's lives to make sure that you're supporting students and children with communication. And I'll give you an example. So oftentimes deaf and hard of hearing children will go home after school, but they could be neglected by the family. They don't have anything to talk about, which can cause more delays in communication for the student, for the child. And course, their self-confidence kind of erodes with time because of this. And it's important to be involved with kids in their lives. Ask them how they're doing, what's going on at school. So simple little things like that will really help them have that wellspring of self-esteem and feel confident. And teamwork is so important. Parents and teachers really need to work together. It doesn't work when the teacher is providing all the information or the things to do for the child, but the parents, they say, okay, but then they don't follow through. They'll get to it later, something like that. Timing is very crucial in deaf and hard of hearing child's life. Any moment of sort of disregarding the approach is going to delay their communication, their education. So I don't want to sort of instill fear, but the point is be involved as much as you can and make sure that they know that you are there for them.
Great. It's kind of wild. I know everybody's experience with parenting and with deafness is different. But it's just, like I said, kind of wild how much I resonate with everything that the three of you are saying. I guess one thing that I would add, because in terms of the family stuff, I think that's pretty similar for me. I know there's this sort of stigma about medical professionals and deaf culture, and Robin, you touched on the medical professionals a little bit. So I think if you go on the internet and try to find out about those cultures and where they butt heads, it looks kind of brutal. I mean, there's a lot that gets talked about a lot. And in our experience, I think we had negative experiences with both. We had a couple medical professionals that really did push hard against sign language. We met a couple deaf people that were really against implants. And I guess what I would say is through those couple, negative interactions, what we ultimately found is that when you move past that experience, they're really just individuals. It's to group these whole cultures as one big thing is not accurate. And we now have an audiologist and a speech therapist and an early intervention person that are all 100% supportive of us, going full steam ahead with spoken English and with American Sign Language, where, at least I consider myself part of the deaf community in Richmond. I hope they consider our family part of them. And we've made, Colin, for example, is somebody that we met through the gatherings in that culture, but now is a personal friend. And I think, for the most part, if you have to hack through a couple experiences like that, it really is worth it. And just like any other group of people, you kind of figure out who you match with and who you get along with and who you pair to, and you run with that. And since kind of figuring that out, we've had great experiences really with both the medical folks and the deaf culture. So the next question, looking back on your journey, looking back on the part of your journey that you've been through so far, I know there's a lot to go. Can you tell us one of your biggest challenges and one of your biggest successes? Sure.
So for us, I think one of the biggest challenges is based on Theo's diagnosis with his Pendrin syndrome diagnosis. So, he has progressive hearing loss. He's actually gone down a little bit over the last year, and at some point, he'll either wake up one day or hit his head, and all of a sudden he will lose all of his hearing. Right. So we're based on everything we've read, there's not a lot of research on this particular syndrome because there just hasn't been that many cases of it. But that could happen anytime. Right. What I'm reading is that it's in the earlier years, probably like pre-10. So he's 3 now. So we're really prepping for that. It makes me very anxious. I think it makes my wife very anxious as well. So that's why we're fast charging, as much ASL, and my wife took a class on cued speech. We're really just trying to find everything we possibly can do to get him as far along as possible. before we have to make that decision on what we're going to do next. But I would say that's the biggest challenge right now. I mean, I have many other challenges, but I know we're kind of running out of time. So I'll just kind of stick with that one. And then the other part of the question, the successes, I kind of touched on it earlier, the journey that we've had thus far, and it's only just been a couple of years. It's really opened the doors to this community that we never knew existed, right? We had no idea, but now we've really immersed ourselves in it. We've been reaching out, all over the Fredericksburg area. I mean, our audiology team is in Richmond, so we do go to Richmond frequently. Just trying to find people, not necessarily, for the most part, finding people with children with hearing loss, so that we can kind of, hear their story, but also seeking out folks that may have the same syndrome that Theo does, and to see, kids around his age, that kind of thing. So it's just really have opened the doors for us to the community. And the folks that we have met are so very nice and caring. It's just, I mean, I would say that's been like one of the greatest successes. Like, we're very lucky. I would say we're very lucky to have found this community and been welcomed in the way that we have so far.
For us, I think one of the biggest challenges has been, learning a new language, and a new communication style. As far as successes, I think, he's only 2, so we've been, every time we see him sign a new word or say a new word, it's a huge success. So we celebrate that, and my wife has a list of all the words that he signs and all the words that he says, and it's amazing. Just every new word or new sign is it's celebrated. So I think those are the biggest successes so far.
Go for it, Colin. This is the same question for all of us.
So one of my biggest challenges for myself as a deaf individual is learning to have a lot of patience. Let me clarify what I mean. So there are going to be a number of struggles, growing up through life, you have various struggles, but you have to continue to have an open mind. And that's what fathers need to do, to teach their kids that you will go through difficult times. But when you fall, you always get back up, again, and you keep moving, you persevere. So for whatever reason, those things are happening. I think most of the times there's legal reasons, accommodations, issues. I'll share a story. I'll try to be quick about this. So when I was in 8th grade, I was trying out for the JV football team for high school. So I made the team. And at that time, the school refused to provide an interpreter for the football team because they said it was an after-school hours activity. My parents were furious. So they contacted the ADA, and at that time, this was 1992, I think the ADA had just been signed into law. So they got a lawyer, sued the school board. We won. And at that moment, my parents taught me that nothing is impossible. You have to make sure you know what you can do, and you have to be aware of the resources out there, especially the ADA. And that would help you through those struggles, getting what you need to getting to some of the successes in life.
Great. I'll tag on to this one too. It looks like I'm an always panelist instead of a sometime panelist at this point. Just it's a fun topic to talk about. I think my biggest challenge was probably just accepting Margot being identified as deaf, and just kind of that lifestyle change. I mean, is probably everybody on this this meeting knows, it's a lifestyle change, right? You're, especially if you're learning a language or if you're supporting devices, there's a new community, there's a new schedule. You meet a lot of new people. It's a big change. There's a lot of things to figure out, and a lot of things to figure out. This works for us. This doesn't really work for us. What are we going to keep doing? How much can we take on? What's really critical? And just kind of moving through that was the biggest challenge. And at the moment, I think the biggest success is really just my kids. I mean, they are showing me that we were right to trust the choices that we made. And that doesn't mean that we haven't made wrong choices here and there, and they kind of show us how to adjust. But ultimately, they kind of, have made us feel like, I think, successful parents, and our decision making, they're just doing well. And I shared that how difficult it was to learn about Margot's deafness when she was born. I guess a follow up to that story that sort of exemplifies what I'm talking about is success is when Charlie was born. I mean, that was perfectly fine that he was deaf. We were almost excited about it because I think we kind of were excited about it because he had that to share with his sister. We didn't really have any questions. We were comfortable with what we were doing. So that to me feels like a success. 9:15. We've got 15 minutes left. I'm just curious. I think this question will be quick, and some of you may or may not even have an answer. But I just wanted to ask, since this is an event, kind of unique event that's specific for dads and guys, are there things that you noticed or experienced in your journey with parenting a deaf or hard of hearing child that are unique to being a father? And you don't have to go in order, because like I said, I don't know if everybody has an answer, just jump in.
For the panelists, or like?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the panelists.
Yeah. So for me, I don't think there's anything unique. But what I would like to share is through this interaction that I've had with this deaf community, I've kind of gotten congratulated for some odd reason. Like, I'm a dad putting in the time and effort. I guess that's maybe not something that is seen very often. But I've been just, encouraged really by a lot of the folks that I've met, saying, you're doing an awesome job. Your son is so young. He's so lucky to have you. Because I think I've heard so many stories about, I guess the negative part of being deaf, which I don't think I even understand. I think it actually is it's just eye-opening and kind of a blessing, really, for Theo to, for him to be, welcomed by the community and just have all this kind of access to new and exciting things. So what I would say is, to the dads on the panel, just show, be there for your child, really. Just be the advocate for your child that, you would probably already be anyway, right? But, just continue to fight for him. For us personally, right now we're with Theo. He's 3. He's, got early intervention just ended. We're now getting him to the school system. So we're doing the IEP track, and I'm coming to every single meeting. I'm not going to be in the back getting notes, from my wife, basically asking how the meeting goes. I'm going to be there for him and be just as educated as she's, helping me be as well. So that we can just be an advocate for our little man, basically. So just keep sticking with it. I know it's probably a really hard road, and kind of what Robin was saying too, something that I didn't say, but the ASL part, it's very fun, but it is very hard to learn language this late in the game. But I'm enjoying it, and we're seeing the positive benefits there. So just keep sticking with whatever you guys decide to do for your child. It's the right move.
And also, I'll say, I don't know about being unique to a father, but I know the thing that has stuck the most with me is what our first speech therapist told us, that the experiences that our child is, going to have is the most important part, because that'll help, whether it's learning ASL or he hears a new sound. And as soon as I heard that, the first thing I thought was vacation. This is pre-COVID. And so I started thinking, all right, where can we go on vacation where he'll experience all these different, he'll have all these different experiences. And so, then COVID hit. And so this, we're hoping that this summer we'll be able to, take a good little trip, but I think it doesn't have to be just vacation. I think just any experience, in the time that you commit to your child, it's huge, because whether, for outside and, he'll hear an airplane, he'll look up and, it's just amazing seeing that, the different things that he's experiencing for the first time, and also signing, because then if there's something we don't know and he'll point to or he'll look at, we quickly, look up how do you sign X, Y, and Z. And so, so I know hearing that from the speech therapist and that, give him as many experiences as possible, as many unique experiences as well. I think that's been what stuck with me the most. And I think, it's what's going to be fun raising him, and that, I'm going to always be, looking out for what are the best experiences, the most awesome experiences that he can have.
I would just add, so I've experienced the same thing, Eric and Robin, that's same for you, actually. Just like when we go on vacation, it's always like, are we going to the beach? I gotta learn how to sign crab, and like it's beach words, whatever. So stuff like that is pretty fun for me. As far as specific to being a dad, it's kind of funny that I notice that there seems to usually be some assumption. And that, so for example, we've done a couple signing courses online, and we're doing one now because of COVID. We have a local one that we really like, but we're, they're not meeting right now. And we had done some stuff before, so we signed up for level 2 instead of level 1. And the teacher emailed and was like, is the dad in level 2 also? I was kind of like, what's that supposed to mean? But then on the flip side, I don't, it seems like I can also jump in sometimes and push something forward. Like an example would be, we didn't, so our both of our kids were implanted around 10 months. We had been signing for 10 months with both of them, and they didn't hear anything. So I didn't want them to go into surgery without an interpreter, and I basically just pushed for me to be their interpreter. And my wife, asked that, and it was kind of like, no. And then I seemed to be able to jump in as the dad for some reason and go, yeah, we're doing this. And somehow it worked out. So it's just kind of funny that people have a perception of what a dad is. So just kind of figuring out how to leverage that maybe. So we have 10 minutes left about that. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We had one that was submitted ahead of time. I think you could submit a question when you signed up. And the question was, did you speak more than one verbal language at home? If not, why? And if so, did the child pick up any other verbal language? I'll jump in real quick and say that we did not. We are doing 2 languages. We didn't, simply because we don't speak 2 languages. I wish we did, but we don't. However, I would say that the one thing we do, my wife took Spanish in high school and college, so she retained some. And we've got my daughter into Dora, which introduces a little bit of Spanish. And I mean, she can count to Spanish, and she can count to 10 in Spanish now. And she's like picking up these little words. So it wasn't my experience, but I do think it's possible. That's just my 2 cents. Anybody else on the panel?
Yeah, we don't use a second verbal language in our family.
So I'm a native Spanish speaker. and it was, it's been tough because I have, and a lot of it's on me. I feel like I've dropped the ball a little bit because before Leo was born, I was teaching our daughter and speaking to her in Spanish. And so once Leo came and now we're learning ASL, it's kind of, now it's ASL and the English. But, I'm hoping that we can, now that I've educated myself a lot more on Leo and the, his, and just kind of what, things have settled down a bit. I think we'll go back to trying to teach him, we'll teach both of our children Spanish.
That's cool. And I do know there are resources out there for bilingual kids with cochlear implants. It's just because the brand that we have is Medell, and I know there's a person at Medell that kind of specializes in that, and there's literature and stuff. Like I said, I don't know a second language. Well, I guess I do to some degree now, but I don't know a second spoken language, so it's not something that I've looked too deep into, but I do know that it's out there. Trying to see if there's any other questions. Looks like somebody raised their hand earlier and might have had a question. So whoever that is, if you want to type it, you can, or if you want to unmute and ask a question, and same for anybody else. If you want to jump in and ask questions, now's the time. See anything else at the moment? So kind of leave it at that. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add?
I mean, I can ask, it might be in the registration. Is anyone local to the Fredericksburg area of Virginia? Maybe not.
Nobody that's speaking up, at least. I will say this is a good moment to do a plug for Hands and Voices, because we have, by the way, I don't think I said this, but the only thing that qualified me to be the facilitator for the panelists was that my wife is on the board and she asked and I volunteered. So nothing special, but it's because we chose implants and American Sign Language, and because we felt a little bit of pushback here and there from both communities, our Hands and Voices felt like a really comfortable spot for us to meet people, because they are supportive of your choices, no matter what your choices are. I think it's just kind of by chance that we have 3 dads here that are all learning sign and are using amplification. However, I know plenty of dads and friends with some of them that are only doing implants. We've heard from Colin, he only uses American Sign Language. And I think all those things are valid for, different reasons, or just because they're your choice, and that's cool. And American Hands and Voices is really supportive of that. Everybody probably has this through through where you logged in, but if you want the web address, it's VA for Virginia, vahandsandvoices.org, or you can just search for Virginia Hands and Voices. It comes up quickly and easily. Before we sign off, I definitely want to again thank Renee, the interpreter, and what was it? Monica, who's our captioner. I think both of those things have been great. You made this possible. Thanks everybody for joining. I really enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do, a dad's group in person sometime, or, even just a family thing in person sometime. Anything with other people at this point would be great after the past year. But definitely thanks to all the panelists for joining in. And with that, if there are no other questions or additions, I think let's say good night for the evening.
I saw a hand raised.
Oh, did you see a hand raised?
Hey, I'll raise my hand.
Great, go
Um,
for it.
So I won't take too long. I know we're closing at the end, but my name's Rashawn Gaskins. I live in the Roanoke area. But also a coach, and my son, he's bilateral hearing loss. He has cochlear implants. Yeah, I guess provide a little context. My first 3 years of coaching, I was at Gallaudet University, so I kind of had an opportunity to see what my future was, essentially, with my son. And one of the things that when I had to kind of get reacclimated to learn ASL was just like getting back to the swing of things again. So I guess the question I want to present to to everyone is, when you're learning ASL, there's a lot of different methods. I know we're very app driven nowadays. And I there are one or two that I use, when I'm looking for different things. And I think somebody made a statement about when you're out in public and you're like, hey, what's the sound for, orangutan, or ladder, what apps or what methods do people use to learn American Sign Language? Or whatever type.
Anybody have a good quick answer?
I mean, for me, I probably just have like an ASL dictionary app. I mean, I'm actually looking at my phone. I don't have too many apps. I try to stay off my phone as much as possible. But what I found is every day I try to carve out about 30 minutes of like YouTube videos. I found, I've done all the signing time. We had access to like Sign It. There's a bunch of famous people out there, but really I've been using Dr. Bill Vickers. I'm sure a lot of people know that. I just repeatedly watch those videos over and over again, and I try to do 20 to 30 minutes every day. My biggest thing right now is, Theo's 3. So he knows words, like he knows airplane, like those kind of things. So that's what I'm trying to do, is really build that vocabulary. Not really focusing on the conversation part as of yet. I can get that through, courses I take online, or really my wife, who's really stepped it up. I can kind of have a conversation with her and she can teach me. But I just try to set that time. It's really hard, very busy, your day, but I usually try to get in 20, 30 minutes of just building vocab through YouTube videos, or, it's probably the quickest way to do it nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, just to comment on learning ASL, apps or videos or whatever would help to some degree. But of course, social interaction would be the best way to learn a language. So unfortunately, we are in a pandemic right now, so we can't just show up in person where we can learn sign language and interact. But I do have one suggestion. There's one company called Sign Language Central. I believe it's SLC. They're based out of New York City, and they do wonderful ASL classes through Zoom. They offer a variety of different types of classes. You have beginner all the way up to advanced level classes. And I think the price is very reasonable as well. I think the last time I checked, I think it was $60 for a class that lasts 2 months, which is pretty good. And I know several people who teach in that company, and they're top in their field with ASL. So these are deaf professionals as well.
So what those two guys have said is the right answer, of course, but just to give a very specific answer, because I definitely agree with what those guys said. However, I also, to the point of the question, there are times where I'm just out in public or in the backyard or whatever, and I see something and or we're having a conversation and I'm trying to express something to my kid and I just don't know like 1 or 2 words. And there's an app called ASL Dictionary, and I think there's a lot of apps called ASL Dictionary. This particular one is blue, and it's got a lady on the app that's sort of like this. You can find it in the App Store, but it's video dictionary and you download everything, so you don't have to be connected. So no matter where you are, it's not like you're waiting for your, a video to load. It just all loads as part of the app. I think it's like, I feel like I paid $6 or $7 for it. But I mean, I've been using it for 5 years and I still use it. And you can kind of keep a list of favorites. Like if you're trying to build vocabulary, or there's a couple things that a couple words that you just learned and you want to make sure you don't forget them, I'll go back to those in my favorites. So definitely that conversational stuff, of course, is the way to learn. But I think that app actually has really helped me when I just need to find those 1 or 2 words. Any other questions? Great. Well, it's shortly after 9:30, and I definitely don't want to hold up anybody, especially our interpreter or captioner that are working for us tonight and done such a great job. So thanks again to everybody, and I hope that we can connect again shortly. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.